Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America. I'm Walter Winchell, and this is RBNB News. We have to interrupt this broadcast to warn our listeners of a really big snowstorm in North Dakota this February 22nd, 1938. This fierce blizzard is making travel very difficult, and it is recommended that all stay indoors unless it is an absolute emergency. This just in, Dr. Victor Ferguson is fighting his way through this blizzard to deliver a baby at the Shock Farm. We'll have more on this very human vigil as reports come in. And now more news from RBNB News, the really big news broadcast. It's been reported today that the price of bread has risen to an astronomical 5 cents a loaf. DuPont has begun the commercial production of nylon bristle toothbrushes, and believe me, folks, they will never catch on. Baseball Hall of Fame has opened in Cooperstown, New York. And this just in. We interrupt our broadcast to return to our primary story this evening, the Vic Shock saga. Born during a snowstorm in a sod house near the small rural community of Cullum, North Dakota. Now, it is our understanding that the father is an outstanding farmer and businessman, also quite a negotiator with a family doctor as well. As a result, Dr. Victor Ferguson has agreed to waive his medical fees if the newly born baby boy is named after him. The agreement is finalized, and the new baby boy became little Victor Shock. This is the 6th child born to the Shocks and the only male. That kind of stress will either make you or break you. But Vic was determined not to be the runt of the litter and learned to hold his own against his more numerous siblings. The United Nations Security Council has held its first meeting. The Dodgers have beaten the Cubs 2-0 in 5 innings. The game was called because of gnats. And television broadcasting has begun. 15 minutes has been allocated for the evening news. Another flash. It has been reported that Vic Shock's parents are both German. They only speak German all the time. It's also rumored that half the population of Cullum is German, the other half is Swedish. We'll have more on that story later. 1946. Vic has just completed his first 3 years of elementary school in a one-room schoolhouse where all classes are taught in, you guessed it, German. Now back to our major story. The Shock family has moved into Cullum, and young Victor has been transferred to Cullum Elementary School. Classes in the big city are quite a revelation for young Victor because they spoke another language, English, which Vic practices to this very day. And on the lighter side, Richard Nixon has made his checkers speech, and the first video recording was made on magnetic tape in Los Angeles, California. It'll never fly. This flash, Vic Shock enters high school, the year 1952. Vic's ability to inspire was evident early on. Even Dwight D. Eisenhower was inspired to campaign heavily and won the election over Adlai Stevenson by a landslide. Back in Cullum, the local high school football team, the ferocious and feared Gophers, had new blood added to their squad with the addition of Vic Shock, whose competitive nature was evident when he played starting center for the Cullum Gophers' 8-man high school football team. The 150-pound center demonstrated his versatility by playing both offense and defense. Vic also played basketball. This may have been the height of his greatest achievements. He was only 5'7". But the biggest news at that time was the influence of the Swedish bombshell Liz Lindgren.
Apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me.
And in the news of the day, the Federal Interstate Highway System Act has just been signed, another make-work government project, and I suppose they'll be tearing up good old Highway 66 next. In other news, this just in, 1956. Vic Shock has finally graduated from high school. Following graduation, Vic is headed for Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. And Buddy Holly and the Crickets released that'll be the day to celebrate the fact that Vic is finally headed to college. In other news of the year, NASA has finally successfully launched an artificial satellite after several miserable failures. And this has the whole country talking. First-class postage is up to 4 cents after being 3 cents for 26 years. The last straw, many Americans say. The public won't stand for a letter costing more than 4 cents. It's August 31, 1958. After holding out longer than most men could imagine, Vic Schock has married high school Swedish bombshell sweetheart Liz Lindgren. Vic, the hard-working and motivated individual that he was and would continue to be, immediately began exploring business opportunities to support his new wife. Following the rise to fame of another famous column-native, film star and television actress Angie Dickinson, Vic set out to make his mark in the business world. In preparation for his future career with credit counseling, Vic wisely sidestepped Tinseltown and made his dough at a bakery before he got into gear as a car salesman and subsequently learned that he could definitely cut it in a meatpacking plant. But we all know how Vic loves cows, and he simply couldn't cut it anymore. He started adding numbers for Murphy Finance and was transferred to their branch office in Aberdeen, South Dakota. Time passed quickly. Before you knew it, Vic was transferred to Murphy's Tulsa office in 1966. The year is 1970, folks, and the United States population is 293,200,000. And the Concorde has made its first supersonic flight at over 700 miles per hour. Now, in other news, this just in. It's January 15th, 1970. Another news flash, our major story of the day. Vic Schock began his illustrious career with Credit Counseling Centers of Oklahoma as a humble but eager credit counselor. Vic rose quickly through the ranks and became president of Credit Counseling Centers on December 1st, 1978. Fashion, if you want to call it that, in America has headed for polyester leisure suits and love beads and bell-bottom pants, but not Vic Schock. His thing, cowboy boots. He wore them to work. He wore them to play. He wore them out. In other news of 1991, the Dow Jones has closed for the first time ever at over 3,000. Intel has released this. Get this speed. The 486 chip has just been announced. I can't imagine anything faster than that. But the big story today, Vic's leadership and accomplishments were recognized nationally by his colleagues at the National Foundation for Consumer Credit. In 1991, Vic was elected to serve a one-year term as chairman of the board of NFCC. He was one of the first presidents of a member agency to be elected to this top national post. Vic has always been a tireless worker with a big heart and a truly great sense of humor. The type of individual who loves and cares about people, and people enjoy and care about him, as evidenced by the long tenures of many employees at Credit Counseling. Of course, for Vic, it wasn't all work and no play. Like the day Vic got to kiss a pig. Why, you ask? Because he lost a bet to another agency. One wonders how much betting Vic does these days. Vic has announced his retirement from the agency effective December 31st. We think, and insiders suggest also, this may have something to do with the Y2K problem. But after 30 years of service, which include 20 as president and CEO, Vic has decided it's time to spend more time with wife Liz, their children, and grandchildren. Plans call for extensive camping and fishing trips, travel throughout the U.S. in their new fifth wheel, and even more frequent extended trips to Branson, Vic's favorite vacation spot. And yes, when he's in town, Vic may even answer an occasional question from Margot back at the office. And now back to our regular programming.
Vic, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to recognize you and thank you for a job well done over the past 30 years. Recently, the board had an executive session and trying to determine how to honor you. After much deliberation, the board decided by 11 to 10 vote, And I'll tell you that I had the awesome decision to cast the deciding vote to commend you for a job well done. Vic, seriously, have a wonderful retirement.
Many months have come and gone since I wandered from my home in those Oklahoma hills where I was born. Though a page of life has turned, many a lesson I have learned, yet I feel like in those hills I still belong. Way down yonder in the Indian Nation.